didn't understand how to make $1 billion for a very, very long time. And the first misunderstanding is that you don't make $1 billion to become a billionaire. You own stuff that's worth $1 billion to become a billionaire. Let me walk you through how I used to think this worked. So phase one, high school Alex was like, okay, in order to be a billionaire, I have to make $1 billion every year, which is ridiculous. But that's what I thought. The second phase, I was like, oh, silly high school Alex, that's not how you make $1 billion. All you have to do is take home $1 billion, $2 billion before taxes over your lifetime. And so then third season, which is where I'm at right now, and you don't make it, you own it. So let's say you own a business that is making $10 million a year top line. All right. Now, half of that is your profit. If this company is worth 10 times its earnings. And I'll explain why why a company like this might be worth 10 times its earnings. After taxes, I take home, 3. Good for me. Next year, because I'm in Mosey Nation and we focus on the main asset that we have, our business, and I go from $5 million a year in profit to $6 million a year in profit. Doesn't sound like a huge win, right? It's like, hey, I added $1 million to the bottom line. Cool, this is great. Well, if we have a 10x multiple, then something I own went from being worth 50 million to being worth 60 million. Now I own 100% of that thing, and I just got something that appreciated by $10 million that I didn't pay tax on. Wait a second. What I got out of the business only went from 3 to 3.5 million after taxes, right? 6 at 40%, you get to 3.5 to take home. I only made an extra $500,000 after taxes this year. No, you made an extra $10 million after taxes because the thing that you own appreciated by $10 million. And that's the thing that I didn't understand for a very long time. And so now let's zoom out. You want to be a billionaire. Again, it's not by me side hustling my way to $1 billion. Like Zuckerberg didn't have Airbnbs he was flipping on the side while he's building Facebook. What did he do to become a billionaire? He built Facebook. If you have the opportunity to spend half of your time obsessing about your passive income rather than saying, I wonder if I could take my $5 million profit business, focus all my attention on it and make it into a $6 million profit business. And then all of a sudden I just added $10 million to my net worth. And so this is how $1 billion actually is made. You have something that makes between 80 and $100 million in EBITDA, or fancy word for profit, that you get a multiple on. And usually companies of that size tend to trade at 15 times earnings, like if you look at the S&P. All right, so you'd really only need somewhere in the area of like $70 million in EBITDA to be a billionaire because you own the company. So it means that you'd have to make a little bit more than $1.3 million, $1.5 million per week in take home, which I know that sounds crazy, but like you have to think in increments. Like imagine how much you made 5 years ago as an entrepreneur. How crazy small does that feel to you now? Because you've leveled up. And so as much as whatever number I just said to you might sound like a lot, 5 years from now, you might be in shooting distance. And so it's really just about understanding, like, how do I reverse engineer what has to happen? And if you want to be a billionaire, it's like, okay, well, how do I make $1 million, $1.5 million a week in profit? Well, if I'm running a 30% margin business, I got to make $6 million a week. There's 52 weeks. I got to make $300 million top line. Okay. So then you can start actually putting tangible goals to this. I want to become a billionaire. You become a billionaire by owning something worth $1 billion. If you really want to be smart about it, you don't shoot for $1 billion. Here's why. You want to shoot for 10 billion or 50 billion. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but realistically, I would never imagine trying to pursue an opportunity that was capped at $100 million a year. You would have to think about opportunities that, 1, were not limited by your time, 2, could serve a very big marketplace, 3, had very high gross margins, and 4, you'd think probably on a very, very long time horizon. And then all of a sudden, you're thinking like a billionaire. The goals we have matter more because of how we measure them and the increments in which we use to build them, more than what the actual goal itself is. And so when someone tells me they have a goal to make 6 figures, what happens is they're going to think that 6 figures is the cap, and they're going to break it down into tiny itty bitty units, and they're going to basically say 100% of my effort equals $100,000, and they're going to measure in tiny units, and then they're going to do 100% effort, and they're going to be like, I was at 94 this year. But if you're thinking about making $10 million, then you'll think in like, okay, for me to make $10 million, I got to sell, let's say a $10,000 thing, and I got to sell 1,000 of them. Okay, that means 3 $10,000 things a day. And if I close 1 out of 3 calls, that means I have to take 9 calls a day. Okay, well, how much do I have to spend to get a call for this thing? All of a sudden, you start thinking in a much bigger increment. And if you're like, well, I don't know what I could sell for $10,000. Well, then you got to figure out something that makes someone else $100,000, and you can sell something that's worth 10. The reason you're not making enough money is because you don't know how to provide enough value. The reason that like a lot of the wealth in the world sits with financiers is because they know how to take someone passively and they can say, hey man, just give me $1 billion and I'll just make you 10% a year on it. And they know how to make 15% a year, and they make that extra 5 on $1 billion, and they take home 50 million a year. And they're like, Works for me. If you can approach the problem that way, you'll start thinking more along the lines of the people that I think you're trying to emulate. You don't make it, you own it. You get paid for what you do, you get returns on what you own. That $50 million business that we were talking about before, 10 million, 5 million profit, 10x. Why would someone pay 10x for something? You're like, I wouldn't pay $50 million for a business that's making 5. Let me tell you why you would. So if that business went from 5 to 6 and then went 20% again, because that was a 20% growth, it went to 7.2, and then 20% again would be 8.6, and 20% again would be what? 10.2, you know, and keep going. If you added all those things up, you'd be at 40-ish million in earnings over the next 5 years. Remember, we bought it for 50. But wait, now we still own the thing, and it's making 12.5 million in profit. Wait, if we just applied 10x, and realistically at this point it probably closer to 12x. But let's just still apply 10x for this. Now we have a $125 million thing that we paid 50 for that already paid us 40 back. And this is where it gets even juicier. To buy that $50 million thing, I didn't write a check for 50. I wrote a check for 15 and I took a loan for 35. And so then at the end of this whole thing, I put my 15 million down. I pay back my loan for the 35. So I only have $10 million left over that I gotta pay back. And now I get 100% of that 125 million minus my original 10 because I covered 5 of it from the cash flow. Oh, I just made $120 million. That's why people do it. The smart money, if you want to sell to institutional investors, they think that way. And so you have to think that way about the assets that you own and the assets that you're building. That is like ultimately how you can make huge leaps in wealth.